Right. Yeah, so I want to make sure that at least the people who are on the class right now, you guys are good with the teams. And then looks like Francisco is a team by himself. That's fine. Um, so we got 8 teams. Anyone still needs a team or uh,
So just a question about group number 5. I'm not
group?
sure if
Mhm.
Michelle is still with the group number 5 or not, because I still talking just me and a Hunter.
Okay. Why don't you send her in? Let me see. Michelle, are you on the class today? Good morning. I don't see her yet. Why don't you send her a note? And I think she was in the class last week, and I haven't seen a message from her otherwise. So let me see my messages. Uh, All right, let's see if she joins today. If not, let's send her an email and check in with her. Okay. Okay. Any other questions on the teams so far? So I know few people are joining in. What we're doing right now is just reviewing and making sure you guys are good on the teams. We got 8 teams. And I think we're from that perspective, we're looking good. Let's talk about few of the project questions first. So projects are due next week. Next week is our last class. You guys will be presenting. Everyone will get to present. You can present as a team, you can present as one person in the team. It's your choice how you do it. I want you guys to present both your final project and the tool in the same like presentation session. I'm expecting, it'll probably be 10 to 15 minutes. Don't exceed 15 minutes. So we kind of have 2 hours for everyone to present. We will have some guests who we can like, connect with and talk in the last class as well. We will review um, all all the coursework, but largely the the project presentation and the tool presentation is through slides how you want to present it, and we'll have some Q&A for it. Cool. I do see a few questions. Let me, okay, just move to okay, great. So I'm gonna share a few questions people had on Discord and we'll talk through them for the final project. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Let me pull up the questions. Okay, great. It's good. Okay. So I'm gonna share here on your screen the Discord questions, and then please ask more questions if you have them. Take this time to kind of like, uh, like get your final project questions answered. So uh, in the forensic case study steps, are we expected to perform everything yourself? So, those steps are given like, how you would go about doing it in the field. The initial work, which is the live response process, the network capture, the data capture part have already been done for you. And you do have a disk in that folder, in that zip file. The DD disk is the hard drive of that machine. So you have the data collected for you. So I am not expecting you to go and write CDs of that data or anything like that, but you have the data. Now, your job as the analyst is to analyze that data and produce the forensic report. Okay, so that's what I'm expecting you guys to do. The second question, is that clear? Does anyone have questions on like the case study process?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Professor. For
Go ahead.
the individual tool that doesn't have to be related to the team forensic investigation, right? The tool that we came out for the individual on the PowerPoint, that could be separate from the team.
Yeah, it's completely separate. It's a tool of your choice. It doesn't have to be. And I'm not expecting that you do individual. Like I'm not expecting that everyone do one tool, like each person does one tool. I'm expecting every group does one tool. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
And so the reason also for that is like, both of these items are a bit of work as a final project for one person. That's why we kind of have a team. So as a team, you kind of just pick one, and I'm expecting the tool part shouldn't take like more than like an hour or 2 hours, right? You could kind of like talk about the tool, maybe only like, so again, like in terms of points, it is like, 100 points only, whereas like, your case study is 300 points. So from that perspective, the tool, I'm just expecting you spend less time, but you kind of, present something on that level. So the deliverable for tool, that's the third question, is the deliverable is primarily your slides. There is no write-up needed, no like, detailed write-up necessary, just present the slides. You could upload the slides in your final as a PDF or a Word document, whichever way you feel comfortable. PDF is probably better. That's all I'm expecting is slides. And I think the last question here is, yeah, so is the presentation both for case study and tool research together? Yes, it is together. So your presentation times, which is 15 minutes, is for both. And you can kind of do like 7 minutes of like maybe your case study and maybe 5 minutes of tool and leave a couple minutes for question answers. So total 15 minutes. Okay, cool. Any questions on final project? And then I know some people are like, your final project, like, since this is like a capstone project and it's based on the labs and how a forensic analysis would go about doing their job, there is no right or wrong answer. It's largely kind of think of it as like a real world case study. So, some people get it right, some people get it like, extra right. But also some people like make mistakes, and that's all fine. But what is important is you go through it and kind of treat it as like a final project and put in the work. Some things it will be easy, like, some things will be harder. So that's completely expected, and you can call those out in your report as well, right? Like, you only have limited time. So what would you do in that limited time with that data for forensic report is kind of what I'm looking at. Okay. All right. Sweet. I know a couple people joined late. People who joined, I just want to make sure like all of you guys are on a final project team. And in this part of the class, we are talking about your final project. Yeah. Any more questions? Danny, does this answer your questions here? I also.
Yeah, those are helpful.
Okay, great. Awesome. Um, Also, I want to be a bit clear on the grading aspect of it. Like, it's a bit uh, harder in that sense because it's a shorter duration of things. I'm not going to get as much visibility into like who did what on the team. I'm going to kind of get a sense from your presentation, but largely the way you want to think of team is like you all stick together and kind of like, unless there is something really wrong or something like that, or someone just doesn't show up, you all will get similar grades for your for your project. So your effort is graded as a group, if you will, right?
Hello.
Yeah.
I guess my only one of my concern, I just want to get hold of my group, please. So
Oh, there you go. We were just calling on you, Michelle. There you are.
no,
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
here. I
Okay.
didn't hear I didn't hear you, but I was
Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead. What question or comment?
yeah, I guess that's my concern with my group members, how to you know to interact together.
We did we lose you, Michelle?
No, I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah, you were just sort of saying you were here. That's all you wanted. Okay. So your group was trying to get in touch with you.
Oh, me
So,
too. That's what me too.
okay, great. All right. So who is from Michelle's group? Let me pull that.
Yasser Abdislam. We did create the group in Discord. It's a team number.
Okay. Yeah, team number 5.
Yes.
So you're on Discord, right, Michelle?
Yes, I am. I am.
Okay, great. So why don't you join the thread of team number 5? So your team is Hunter, Casel, and I think they created on Discord, I think they created team 5. So if you go in threads here, team 5 right here.
Team 5. Okay.
Yeah, your team 5.
All
As
right.
it loads, so join them. They were asking about you and you were asking about them. So great. Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right. Okay, cool. Sweet. Okay, guys. All right. Okay. Sweet. Maybe let's just go quickly and get an update from the teams. Team 1, do you guys want to kind of like just give like maybe a minute how you guys are doing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, we're doing great. We have been chatting on Discord together. We have Google Docs set up where we're working and contributing to that and editing that all together. So we've just been kind of working like that.
Perfect. Did you choose a tool topic yet?
Yeah, I believe it's the sleuth kit.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Great job. Awesome. Team 2, Nella, Chigozri, Kevin, any of you guys want to give a brief status update where you are?
We've been chatting on Discord, but I think that's about it so far.
Okay. How are you guys doing? How you guys feel about progress? You have a plan in place? Any bottlenecks? Any things you want my help on?
I really haven't had time to look over it too hard, just trying to play catch up with the rest of the work. So I've got nothing to contribute with that. If anyone else wants to speak.
Okay, so I am going to suggest like, because your project is 33% of your grade, you should really prioritize that. So, are you guys like have a plan in place to kind of work on it? Like maybe like this weekend, upcoming 3-4 days?
Yeah, I just texted him yesterday, but I have no answer about what was the best time like to have a meeting to organize the information. I had a chance to read it. So I'm pretty much just waiting on them to see what's the best tool to work with and then move from there.
Okay, so Nella and Chigoziri, are you guys like, can you make sure like today you have a plan in place so you guys work together as a team?
Yeah, actually we had assigned specific project. So I'm just seeing Yuli's message. I think he sent it last night. I think if people can make out some time, maybe within the lab period, we could discuss about some things going forward.
Yeah, and use the lab time today between 1 and 3 and get together and like have a plan in action. Also, I like, if one person is very busy and other people are not able to like, hear from them, I wouldn't wait on anyone. Like, just go ahead because you would want to do the work. The work's clear, just pick something and go with it. Don't depend on a person if they're not responding. Okay. All right. So how about by end of today's class, you guys pick a tool topic? Yeah, maybe in the break, maybe you guys pick a tool topic. Yeah.
And that sounds good. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Team 3, Christina, Rob, Eric, Mo. How you guys doing?
I think we're doing pretty well. We met last night. We have sort of our assignments in terms of how we're breaking up the case study to review, and we're going to meet again on Sunday to talk through where we are. I think Rob had looked at some templates and found some templates. I know we had some questions on the DD file. But I think we're in a good place.
Okay, great. Did you guys pick up a tool topic?
I think we're leaning towards HXD, the hex editor.
Okay.
We have a draft concept for that one. We're still discussing it, but that was sort of what we discussed last night.
Awesome. Awesome. Great job, guys. Great job. Oh, sweet. Craig and Anthony, Tiago, Mokrang.
Yeah, we met on Wednesday to start talking about how to approach this. I would say that because we're all extremely new to this, we haven't really figured out how to break it down. It kind of feels a little bit like a cart before the horse type issue where it feels like we need to do the project in order to understand how to actually split up the work. So we're meeting again after class today to try to figure that out. We've all taken some time to dig through the data. It's been a little challenging getting everyone on the same communication system, but I think we've got that figured out. We have not chosen a tool topic yet, but we'll talk about that this afternoon. Get that figured out.
Sounds good. How about you guys also in the break, if you can pick a tool topic, that would be great.
Sure.
Awesome. Hunter, Michelle, and Kiesel, team 5.
We didn't make any progress for now because we have an issue like to communicate between each others. So we may, I'm not sure how Michelle is here today, and I don't see Hunter today in the class. So if they are here today, we can meet after class if they are free, and we're gonna talk about the topic and stuff like that.
Okay. So Michelle and Kiesel, how about you guys pick a tool topic during the break? Yeah.
Because I'm not sure Hunter, he told me because we chatted last night and he told me like I talked to the professor and you told him that you're gonna move us to the group 3. That's why he told me. So that's what I'm waiting to make sure if we're gonna stay the same group or you're gonna move us to the group 3.
I don't
Right.
remember.
That's why you told him, yeah. So I want to make sure.
I don't remember a conversation around that. So for like, yeah, just I don't know the context what he was saying, but you guys are team 5 and you guys are together. If
Yeah.
Hunter doesn't show up, you guys both can move forward.
Yes, I am on
That's-
Discord right now, but I still not able to find the team here.
Okay, let's
Or should I just
who is this?
this is Michelle speaking.
Okay. Yeah, you are in team 5, Michelle. No? And then you're
I
not
know.
what's your and you're not able to find the thread, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your Discord
Team
handle?
5. Oh, I see. I see.
Okay, you see it?
Yeah. Should I just send it? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just send a message there. What's your Discord handle?
Michelle. I just sent it's SF Warriors 70. I just sent something. It's me.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Okay, you're there now. So
Yeah.
how about both of you guys pick a tool topic in the break, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great, awesome. All right. Team 6 Cyberhawk, how are you guys doing? Danny, Bailey, Andrew,
We met
Jeffrey.
yesterday evening, and we looked at some of the instructions for the forensic case study. That's why we had so many questions about like what we're supposed to be taking a look at. And we're gonna try and meet today in the evening as well to sort of figure out our plan going forward, writing up the work. We didn't discuss a tool topic because we weren't sure whether we were doing this individually or as a group. So we're going to discuss that today.
Okay, great, awesome. Sounds good. We have one person who is not part of a team. So I'm just gonna bring that one up right away. Okay, that's fine. They want to do it themselves. Okay, that's fine. Let me pick up. So, sorry to kind of go, but yeah, all right. Okay, so I think I'm gonna add one more team here, Roman. Okay. All right, we'll do that. Okay, so for you guys, Andrew, Danny, and team, what's the tool topic you guys chose?
We haven't decided yet. We're going to meet tonight, and I apologize to the team because I was having some microphone issue on my laptop, and yeah, we're going to meet tonight at again, and then we can decide. You can put a question mark there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and if you can actually do it in the break, that would be great because I wouldn't want you guys to spend too much time on tool given, there is the case study to finish. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I think team 7, Amin, Erdin, and Alexander, where you guys? I think Amina just joined. Or is team 7, where are you guys at?
This is Alexander. We haven't, I don't know if they've met, but I sent a Discord message yesterday trying to get more info about what we're doing, but I haven't gotten any response yet.
Okay. Okay. So you guys have not been able to get together, is that right?
Yes, maybe if they did, I don't know, but I sent a message on Discord, but I didn't get any response.
Okay, I see Amin here. Okay. Amin, you're part of team 7 with Alex. So can you guys meet after the class today? Or decide a time to meet?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, great. And how about in the break, decide a tool topic you guys are going to present on? Yeah. Okay, so let me also bring up Discord again. Just 1 second. So team. Okay, you guys have not made a channel yet. Team 9, team 7. Oh, you do here. Okay, you guys are here. Yeah, Amin, can you respond on your Discord thread here and get together with Alexander here? Okay, great. Okay, great. Awesome. Awesome. All right, let's do the one people team. Francisco. Francisco. All right, not here. How about Roman? Roman, I know you're catching up, but are you clear on the project part of
Yeah,
things?
Professor, I'm here. Yeah, I'm catching up. I'm sort of clear, but I'll be clear by the end of the class.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Okay, guys, and how about you? You also pick a tool topic here. So maybe like when we take a break, we'll do a few extra minutes. And if you can kind of come up with your tool topic, that would be great. Yeah, just I wanna like, if you do good on your case study and the presentation, like that's 33% of the class, okay? So I would prioritize this work ahead of anything else you have. The labs and the reading will help you with the final project for sure. But don't wait on finishing them if you are way behind on anything to finish the final project. Like I would just get started on the final project, like like now. So please make sure you make time. Like I would expect you guys to spend at least 6 to 7 hours on the case study and 2 hours at the most on the tool topic. Yeah. Sweet. All right. That was the final projects. Any questions through all this conversation so far? Okay, great. So also remember your team number will unless like you guys have some hard requirement, the way we'll kind of maybe do the presentations is in the order of the team numbers. So we'll go through 1 through 9, unless someone's like, oh, I need to like go in first. So just will let me know if you want to, but otherwise the presentations will be team 1 through 9. Okay. Sweet. All right. Okay, great. Sweet. Let me pick up the reading leads so far, and then we will front load the reading today. So just 1 second. So we had chapter 9 and 10. Today. So do we have Abdeslam for chapter 9 today? And I see Nella. Nella, did you do chapter 10?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. We don't have Abdeslam, do we? Okay, yeah, no, he's here. Abdeslam, do you pardon me if I'm butchering your name, do you feel comfortable leading for chapter 9? I don't hear from him. Anyone else who feels comfortable leading for chapter 9?
Oh, sorry, I was talking, but I didn't see myself. I was on mute.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, okay, great, awesome.
Sorry.
Okay, you feel comfortable with chapter 9, yeah?
Yeah, I'm gonna try. It's okay.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, guys. So this one we will do because it's only two chapters, but they are meaty in a way. We will do bigger groups. We will just break out into 2 groups, and we'll do 10 minutes. Same thing we've been doing. The person who kind of was the reading lead kind of gives a little bit review of it, and then you sort of collect your questions, talk about that chapter as you kind of come back. Okay. So we are going to do breakout rooms now, and we'll do 10 minutes, and we'll do 2 breakout rooms. There will be a bit bigger breakout rooms. So I'm gonna split all of us into 2 groups, okay? And then I'll go between the rooms. All right, let me 2 rooms. All right. So room 1 is chapter 9, chapter 9. Room 2 is chapter 10. So I'm gonna open up the rooms. So we got I'm just gonna make sure we chapter 9. Chapter 9 is room 1 and chapter 10 is room 10. Sorry, room 2. Okay.
I don't think I'm supposed to be here.
Oh, Nella, you're supposed to be in room 1.
Yeah, I wasn't put into any group. My screen reloaded and now I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. There we go. Are you? I think everyone is back, right? Like, all right, let me just double check. All right. Great. So let's talk about chapter 9. Who did you guys pick to ask questions or summarize?
I think we didn't pick any questions. I don't know why.
Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. I know some people mentioned it in their notes and stuff like that. Did you talk about bit shifting? What's bit shifting?
Oh, the bit shifting? I
Yes.
don't think so. Because it gives it was a lot of things in the chapter 9. It's like the fat, the bit shifting, NSRL.
So what's bit shifting?
Uh,
Hey, so we'll talk about it. Just think about it for a minute. And I just also want to bring up the So you guys talked about steganography as well, right? So let's talk about chapter 9 first. Okay. So, in general, like, the chapter goes a little bit into like, analysis and validation, and a lot of like analysis tools are platform dependent. And for like desktop platforms, Autopsy is one of the platforms, right? So Autopsy, in your lab also you sort of looked at Autopsy. It helps, like, Autopsy can perform analysis on few different types of file systems. So it can do Microsoft FAT, which was in the DOS operating system, NTFS, which is in Windows, exFAT, which is in Windows, UFS1, UFS2. These file systems, can be handled by Autopsy. It also can do Mac HFS file system, HFXS file system, and then Linux file systems. So in your final project, like that DD file, right? That's an image. And then in that image, the file system resides. And so the disk drive or disk dump in some way, that file is basically what the hard disk would be like if if you got the physical hard disk, like, how the things are laid out. Now, how it's read and how files are constructed, that's done by the file system. And so what Autopsy does is it's like this forensic tool which analyzes the file system and helps you kind of like look at like maybe deleted files, maybe deleted blocks, things like that. So you want to kind of think of that from an analysis perspective. It's a great tool in that sense. It can also handle like, a virtual machine disk or something like that too, right? It has access to a bunch of like hashes of different files as well. So there is a lot to just the tool, right? Like, how you kind of, do the hashing and configure the tool. And so, for a lot of these things, the hash is sort of like the fingerprint of the file, right? If the fingerprint of the data in general, like if it were like an image, and if you kind of constructed it from like these deleted blocks, and you were able to get like the same, same hash as the image which was on a file system, then that's great, because what you've reconstructed, you can prove in court of law that, oh, they are the same data, because the hashes really like are kind of the fingerprints of the data, if you will. So an Autopsy helps you kind of do that. And when you kind of open up these files in like a viewing tool, like, you can kind of look at the file if you reconstructed it properly, right? So keep that in mind. So hashes, the way you want to think of hashes, and that's the easiest analogy, is they are sort of the fingerprints of data. So very, very common what you see is MD5, but MD5 is like a old, or it's it's a fingerprint format, if you will, but it has its own issues. So a lot of systems now use a bit finer hash called as SHA-256. So the book talks a little bit more about MD5, but a lot of modern systems use SHA-256. So to keep that in mind. It talks about a whole bunch of different types of hashing, right? Like how would you create a fingerprint? You would, if it's a hard disk and the hard disk is a bunch of magnetic drives and the data is stored around a cylinder, and each cylinder is like sort of like a block. And so, the way the hashing is done is each block is hashed, and then all those hashes are collected, and then all the hashes are hashed. So that sort of creates a unique fingerprint for the disk. So sometimes it's important to know that if you're trying to reconstruct the image and some blocks are damaged, things like that, right? Like, so you want to kind of be aware of that. All right. So, validation is primarily sort of the hashing mechanism is the validation mechanism. You want to think of it. Now you want to think a bit about data hiding techniques, right? This is where you're trying to figure out, oh, what did the perpetrators do with the data? If they just went and deleted data, you can still go through the disk, and because the hard disk doesn't instantly go and delete the data. So there is difference. The hard disk doesn't really delete the data right away. It waits for a little bit until it's the right time to delete the data. So if you get a hard disk, then you can still go and find deleted file. That's not very much true in case of like solid state device, which is SSDs, like flash devices or your phones. If you delete something and it doesn't go in a recycle bin in an SSD, that gets deleted pretty quickly. So it's a little bit, it's quite challenging to find a deleted file in an SSD because like the system itself deletes the file. So, you want to be aware of that. So if it's a mobile phone, if the file is like deleted, and it doesn't go into recycle bin, then, the file is actually gone from the disk. Because the disk which stored on phone is solid state. So, that's like, that's basic perpetrators, but there are more advanced, like, let's say there are actors who know technology really well. It could be people who are very aware with technology. So they might use techniques to keep their secret data. So like, think of it like, let's say, Bitcoin keys, or like, encryption keys or things like that. So you can hide them in the file. Amin, you have a question? We can't hear you. Why don't you type
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's about what you were saying. I was going to actually ask about encryption. If they've been like, let's say it was encrypted, and then you're using a solid state drive. Is it after you? Let's say you're able to retrieve it, then would you still be able to encrypt it, or sorry, decrypt it?
Yeah, so you need the keys for the decryption, and a lot of times the keys are stored. So the way the keys are stored, they're based on the encryption scheme of the device. So if it is like a mobile phone, a lot of time these keys are stored in a special chip on the device called trusted protection modules, and they have different names for different platforms, but it's basically a chip where all the data gets stored. In a lot of cases, it's a piece of hardware which is very sensitive to tampering. So, there are tools, and they are very pricey tools like, like Cellbrite or things like that. They are actually able to get in and get the keys. But the way these systems are designed, they're increasingly kind of made in a way like if you try to retrieve something from it, it sometimes self-destructs. Or like, depending on the scheme, but like, there are tools which will go and retrieve that data, and that's kind of what you would use. So most forensic teams like have access to tools like Cellbrite, which can go into the TPM and get get the keys. So if you in last couple of years, you might have seen this, high profile Apple case where, there was a lot of press about like, how they wanted the government wanted Apple to decrypt the device, but Apple didn't do that. But then after a bit, they kind of let go because, they basically went to a tool and then they used the hacks in the tool to decrypt it. But Apple didn't do it for them. So that's sort of like but that's basically what happened was the decryption keys live in the trusted protection module, and there are these bugs or vulnerabilities on these protection module which are 0-day, and only some of the tools have them. So that's why they are highly protected. They're highly like controlled, that sort of stuff. And they're not authorized or sanctioned by the maker of the device. So Apple is usually very mad about that, because that means like their devices are vulnerable to attacks. Sweet. So yeah, so like that's that's what offered by the device maker. But like smart people or like people who know technology do a lot of techniques of storing these keys, and these are like kind of like ways in which you would store, like especially bit shifting. You could kind of like have a bit shifting scheme. You can shift the bits in certain way, kind of like we talked about AES, like how you sort of like do encryption by this mechanism of like shifting the bytes by certain key numbers, right? Like the numbers in the encryption key. So bit shifting is similar, but it's a scheme which is known to the person, so then they can decrypt the data by that. Steg analysis is like, you would take a perfectly fine looking file, like a JPEG or a Windows Word file or a PDF file, and you would find places in that file to store data. So an unsuspecting person especially would just be like, oh, this is a PDF, it opens files, I can look at it, reads like a book. But like someone who wants to read that data, they can actually run a tool on it and get that key back, things like that. So that's called steganography, where you would store data in perfectly fine looking things. So you probably want to scan the files for something like that. Hey, does this look like that? Is there a data section in this file that has like data which seems a little bit off, like so there are tools like that. So those are like techniques. There are also other standard techniques of like recovering passwords. There is usually especially and more like hard disks are getting phased out with solid state devices, and it has its own challenges for forensic analysis, because solid state devices like act right away, whereas hard disk kind of would have bad sectors or stuff like that, whereas like on a flash drive there is not so much like a bad sector, like there is a little bit of wearing, and that's kind of how data sort of like, you don't want to write on the same area a lot, so they kind of like write on different parts of the solid state device and kind of have a scheme for that. So you could retrieve some data from that analysis, but in the hard disk world you can kind of look at some of the bad sectors, and sometimes you can get like half the data from there, and you would know like maybe like 2 years ago what was on there, kind of deal, like so keep those in mind. So there is a fair bit of like hands-on project on this as well. I wasn't expecting you guys to do that in chapter 9. Let me see if there is anything else I wanted to cover on chapter 9. All right, now that we have covered just a summary, yeah, so maybe I'll talk a little bit about recovering passwords. Was like there are several tools, and these tools primarily work from the fact that you can guess passwords. And passwords are, for most systems, are not stored in clear, right? Sweet. I'm just looking at your chat. It seems like someone had a comment on bit shifting. Yeah, so you guys have a general good idea. Bit shifting is kind of like encryption in a way, but there is a scheme. What you do is, in a perfectly fine file, you shift the bits so you can store your data like in some scheme of shifting the bits. And that's usually how encryption also works. Like, the encryption key is nothing but this, scheme of like how you're going to like, shift the bytes sometimes, like, and there are some additional operations on it based on the encryption algorithm. But bit shifting is a little bit simpler. Like all you're doing is, I'm going to say, first byte, I'm going to shift it by 4. Second byte, I'm going to shift by 2. And you kind of come up with like a scheme like that. Anyways, so recovering passwords. So MD5. So back in the day, a lot of systems would hash their passwords on MD5. And so if you actually look online, and a lot of like, your any of your like, hack the box or any of your contests, they would kind of, have you guess the passwords, but like you can kind of do hash analysis on MD5, and there is a type of attack called rainbow attack. And so this rainbow attack, like really you can get all the MD5 hashes and try to figure out what the password was. And so it doesn't need a whole lot of compute because it's a little bit weaker algorithm. So a lot of passwords which are stored in MD5, you can pretty much guess what the password is based on what the MD5 is. So you can take an MD5, there are several tools online, and you can just go paste in that and say, oh, the password might be this, this, this. And so that's an easy way to break password. There are more sophisticated tools like John the Ripper, which would use a bit where, you run through a dictionary of passwords and try to see if the hashes which come out of those passwords match the passwords in the system. There is other ones as well, like last bit or passphrase, but the one which comes bundled in Kali Linux is John the Ripper. And so that type of attack is called brute force attack. The one I talked on MD5 is that you're not really brute forcing. You already have like a dictionary somewhere. It's called a rainbow attack. So you already know that, because there are only so many hashes, that I have a hash like this, that means the password might be this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, Amin has a comment, same as like, rooting a cell phone, you might use a tool like Odin. Similar, because rooting a cell phone also kind of compromises keys, but not, it compromises keys more than the passwords. Passwords are a little bit less secure, keys are a bit more secure because keys are longer. But yeah, typically like rooting devices also compromise a key. They also are a brute force attack. Sweet. All right. So yeah, we talked about rainbow table, and then there is a scheme to kind of secure it, which is called salting for passwords. Sweet. Awesome. By salting, what you really do is, you take a password and you add something unique to that machine or person or device. And, like very many times you have these password systems online, which will ask you, what's your favorite movie star, or what's your favorite color, and like things like that. So sometimes like these kind of answers, they will add to the password and then use that in, generating a hash. So that adds a little bit more uniqueness to your hash, because the second answer is more unique. But more and more, like it's sort of better to kind of do these things which some people call one-time passwords, one-time keys, things like that, which are like these hash codes, and which are uniquely generated every time you're trying to access a system. So that system is in general a bit more secure because it doesn't depend on something which is stored. It's more live. Sweet. Awesome. Any questions on chapter 9? We're going to jump into chapter 10 and take a break, and then we'll come back and cover the content for today as well. And all right, chapter 10. Who did you guys pick to summarize or ask questions? Nella, did you have a volunteer from your group?
No, nobody had any questions.
Okay. Jump into it. Sweet. So, chapter 10, virtual machine forensics, live acquisitions and network forensics. So, the virtual machine part is like a little bit, broad and not as technical in the chapter here. It covers a bit more about like hypervisors and type 1, type 2, that sort of stuff. It is evolving rapidly because there is like, different types of systems now where, it's not really like a hypervisor. There is like these images, which are kind of like Docker images, which are like, which are parts of the system. So that there is a lot more evolving in terms of like what is an image on a network. But what is super interesting and remains like gold standard is like the network forensics in that chapter. So around the, how do you kind of, get data from a network? So if you were to tell me one sentence, like, how would you get data from any network to kind of look at what was going on? And this is in your final project as well, right? So what format would you use to kind of capture network data? Anyone? Yeah, Mo has a right answer, PCAP. So yeah, so TCP dump produces a PCAP file. TCP dumps only TCP data, whereas like in a PCAP, you basically, PCAP stands for packet capture. And so what you're really doing pretty much like at one uniform thing on all networks these days, including the cell phone networks, is they are all packet-driven networks. We no longer have like the old telephone lines where the system was like circuit switching, where, if you made a call from person X to person Y, there was a dedicated phone line from person X to person Y all the way, right? And that the way that system worked was like having one physical dedicated line between 2 points, and that was called circuit switching. But most modern networks are packet switching. And what packet switching basically means is, instead of having the dedicated line, when a person X sends something to person Y, they send in this small packet format. And that packet has some information about like, what it is, where it's going, that sort of stuff, some metadata and some data, basically. And then that package can be any protocol. It could be like, it could be UDP protocol, it could be TCP protocol, it could like, be part of like, configuring the network. There is all types of packets, but end of day, it is a packet. And so when you capture all these packets, you basically capture what was going on the network, and you get to know a lot about that. So there are these packets called like ARP, ARP packets. So there are several types of packet which helped in like configuring a network, in trying like deciding the handshake, doing session keys, things like that. When you do a network capture, you basically know what was going on at that time in the network. And that's very helpful. And so it's again like a gold mine of information, but it's also a fire hose of information. So you can't really do network captures too long because just the data will be so much that you can't really, you can't really get your head around it. So keep that in mind. So a lot of times, like the way these things are kind of deployed is like there are these network devices which get deployed in network to kind of like, look at interesting packets and look at interesting information. And so they're just sort of like kind of think of them as their spies, which are installed on your network to see like something fishy going on in the network. And so they're called honeypots. So these honeypots basically sit there and gather information. And very many times you make these honeypots look like targets. You can you call them like, oh, this is like the password file for the network, or you can kind of say like, this is the domain controller for the network. So there are like all these kind of different types of devices which attackers are super interested in it. And so you would just pose one device as that and kind of leave it a little bit in open so attackers try to get to it. And then what did the attackers do, what IP address they came from, what like packet did they send, that sort of stuff. So you kind of study them. And so that whole mechanism is called honeypots. And there is like a whole like, discipline of doing that. And a lot of like advanced defense systems have that deployed because, that way you would study the attacker because no one just attacks once. If someone goes to that effort, they kind of come back. And so honeypot like pretty much is like, you kind of like, you sort of like put them in like a, get the attacker's information and you kind of put them in like maybe like a little bit of a box or a cage, and you try to study this weird thing which they were trying to do to your network. So it is, yes, I think Rob is right. It is sort of like entrapment. It is a way to study what your attacker is going to do. So some networks have that. So that's a great place to start when you're collecting information, because if something bad happened on a network, then you know that maybe the honeypot caught an interesting trail of things. So you should definitely look at that. Sweet. All right. Any questions so far? Can someone tell me difference between type 1 and type 2 hypervisor?
I think in the in the document it has a picture. The type 2 has an OS in between.
That's right. Yeah. How will you describe it?
When you have an OS, you require more resources like RAM and CPU. I guess what I'm trying to think about is when you have a type 1, which most company don't use because it's cost too much, right? And they use type 2, or was it the other way?
Yeah. So, type 1 is basically, hypervisor is software. And if you ran this software directly on hardware, and then you can load whatever operating system you want, then that's called type 1. Type 2 is, the software, the hypervisor software, which loads other operating system, is ran by the operating system. And so, very many times that's sort of what you use. But even the type 2 is built on like, a special hardware extensions which are available in the chip. So you will probably, when you bought an operating system or when you bought a PC a couple of years ago, there would be options like, oh, this has Intel hypervisor on it, this doesn't have it, or like, so something which has a hypervisor has support in the in the hardware to run a hypervisor, right?
I see.
Yeah,
I'm trying to experiment this on my Lenovo. I think that's why it causes all these crashes, because I have a Windows 10 machine and I'm trying to install hypervisor. It says you need Windows 11.
Yes.
And
So
my hardware doesn't support Windows 11. This.
yeah, and so there is also a reason, because maybe the processor you have on that machine doesn't have the new instructions which physically supports hypervisor.
Oh, I see.
So, that's sort of the thing. So, but most typical systems today are type 2, but if you ran something in data center and you want to get more performance out of your machines, then you would probably want to take the operating system out and run the hypervisor directly on the chip. And, VMware offers something like that. And you typically run that only in like, super, super performant environment and a data center.
Like Blade server,
Yeah.
server and stuff like that.
Right. Sweet. Awesome. Let me see. Yeah, so can someone tell me how would you go about doing a live acquisition if you were doing it? There was a lab on this. First of all, what's live acquisition?
Isn't that where you're getting out of a live network without taking it down? That's not in a static state.
Yeah, you're taking information from live systems. Like, and the live system might be the memory of the machine. It might be like the packets on the network right away. But most of the times when you say live acquisition, what you mean is the information in the RAM of the device. So sorry, what does RAM stand for? Random access memory. So because if you power off the machine, that all disappears, right? And so that's the live data, it's the hot data, because like if you loaded something, if you visited a web page and the information for that is just stored in the RAM, for example, right? So that's what a live acquisition is. And so very many times you want to kind of if you especially appear at a crime scene, you want to get dump of all the things which were hot in the machine, and those were sitting in the RAM. So that's live acquisition. Okay, and in a final project, there is a live acquisition in the data sample you have. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question because I see that based on the concept of the order of volatility, and there were concerns about it in the text. And I was wondering how long typically those information stay available on the RAM?
The volatility depends on the type of information, right? Like, so if it is network packets, no one, like maybe the router might store for like, for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds duration things, that's all. But no one really stores the network packets very long because it's just too much information. So that information is gone. Like if you're not there. RAM is like, for example, your device, like your computer. Like if the power is turned off, because a computer typically doesn't have like a battery or a UPS, right? So it's going to lose all the information in the RAM as soon as you power it off. On your cell phone, it's a bit tricky because cell phone has a battery, and even if you sort of turn off the cell phone, the information is still on there. But if you do a hard boot of your cell phone because you're like really powering everything down, then the information from the RAM gets wiped out.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Cool. All right, sweet. And so, you know, when you do like network capture, you know, I think the best packet analyzer, and this is sort of what you should use for your final project as well, is Wireshark. There is other like network miner and such, but Wireshark is like easy to use, and you probably will find a ton of tools which will help you get started on it too. So that, okay. Sweet. Maybe I'll just talk a little bit about zero-day attacks. And this I kind of brought up like earlier too, right? Like in the context of the iPhone, like how, you know, the how the government was able to unlock the devices using like a tool to get keys from the trusted process module. So for a lot of these things, there is these bugs called as zero-day bugs. What really zero-day bugs are, like, you know, the maker of that software or the maker of that device does not know about that bug. They do not know that this bug exists. And so that means there is 0 days until, like, you know, that anyone who made the thing knows, so they cannot fix it. So these zero-day bugs are typically kind of like, you know, these secret keys which you can get into systems in. There are very few of them, so they are very expensive, and there is an underground black market for these, and they trade these zero-day bugs. And so typically how these forensic tools and a lot of these hacking tools sometimes work is they go and buy these zero-day bugs from nefarious, you know, organizations and people, and then they use those bugs to actually be able to get into the devices. And so when they do that, that's sort of called a zero-day attack. Usually there is a difference between people who find those and people who perform the attacks. There is, because, you know, the bugs usually get traded and bought like in an underground black market, and then the people who actually do the attacks are not the people who found the bugs. They basically end up buying them most of the time. Sweet. Awesome. All right, that was that. I think we are also at a good stopping point here. Any questions?
Yeah, it seems to me I have a question. Like, remember last week when Sherman, was it Sherman Kwok? He said there was a camera showing, and people might be across the street removing the drive, deleting files. So as a forensic expert, when you arrive on site, how do you know when to turn off the machine or not? Because once you turn off the machine, that will stop the deletion process, but it also reset the time clock. So I'm just thinking about when I'm arrived on site, there's so many things going on.
Yeah,
Try to capture data, but should you stop the machine?
So it's a tricky question, and there is no right or wrong answer to it. It really depends on the circumstance. Have any of you guys seen Money Heist, or have you seen the Money Heist show?
Yes, I have.
But you know, so there are some crazy criminals who really understand like how law enforcement works, and they kind of try to misuse like how the protocols and the systems they would follow to their advantage. So just because the fact of like, if I said you do this, that means like there is going to be some criminal there who's going to misuse that, you know, to get his gain. And Money Heist is like a great series on like how they do that, knowing law enforcement very deeply. So that's the part which it's art. You know, you really have to know what you are into before you kind of make the call, and it takes a bit of like, you know, and there again, like you might make mistakes, like there is no right or wrong answer there.
Okay.
But you know, the fact is, like, you know, very many times very standard things would be misused by criminals. Like, you know, someone might just plant a machine there which kind of you turn on or turn off, and they might, Like, that might trigger like a whole bunch of wipes, for example.
Or maybe
So,
when you
yeah.
perform a graceful shutdown, it
Yeah.
will trigger a bomb or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like there could be a whole bunch of stuff, and it's really depends on the scene. Awesome, guys. So when we come back, so today we are going to cover a bit broader set of things, and these are like all kind of new topics. So it's going to be a bit more around like, email and social media investigation, which is basically, your OSINT forensics, if you will. Like, how do you get open source information on people? How do you get information from mobile devices? We'll talk a little bit. This is like a huge topic. It's very, unfortunately, there isn't that many good open tools here because the market is primarily driven by these super expensive tools like, but there is mobile device, and then we'll talk a bit more about cloud flow forensics. So, getting data, it's thankfully or unthankfully, thankfully for maybe law enforcement, but maybe unthankful for private people sometimes. The cloud is great place because they could subpoena a big cloud vendor like Amazon or Google and have them legally give a lot of data. But sometimes that means like a lot of people's, even if they didn't want to, their private data gets sent out. Like, so cloud's a little bit different beast in that sense. So we'll cover those topics, mobile, open source, and then for cloud. Sweet. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at it's 10:40. We'll come back at 10:50. Maybe 10:55. What I want you guys to do is take a bit and take maybe 5 minutes and decide on your tool presentation as well. So maybe take a 10-minute break and take 5 minutes to decide between your team what tool you're going to present on. So when we come back, we'll first start with what tool people had decided, people who don't have a tool yet, and then we'll go into the content for today. Okay. Awesome. All right, as I see people come back, all right, I'm just gonna go through teams which don't have a tool yet. Nella, Kevin, Chigoziri, were you guys able to pick a tool? Craig and team, Hunter and team 5.
I don't know. I sent a text message. I mean, I sent a text on the Discord to the team number 5, but nobody responded to me.
Okay, then why don't you just pick one up by yourself? Nella is saying autopsy. Nella, team 7 already picked autopsy. So you want to pick something different? Team 5, you can make a decision for the team if you don't hear from them.
I don't want to make a decision about myself, to be honest, because maybe they are not familiar or they are not feeling good with
It's
that.
okay. You're gonna be graded. So you just pick something. Team 6.
If you don't mind going back, I can say for team 4, we were talking about looking at either Binwalk or Wireshark.
Okay, that's fine.
Cool.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, and team 6 will be the Linux DD command.
Linux, that's great. DD. I'm just gonna say DD.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I think yeah, anyone else?
I think we're gonna get Wireshark on number 5, team 5.
Team 5, Wireshark. Okay. That's fine. And team 4, it's fine. You can decide between Binwalk or Wireshark. And I haven't heard from Nella, so I'm just going to add you guys to autopsy as well. Just kind of make your presentation not similar to team 7. That's fine if you guys.
Professor, this is Roman. I'd like to do Wireshark too.
That's a little bit too much Wireshark. Would
Okay,
you-
hang on, I'll switch to something else. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Professor, do we have a burp suite or not?
Burp suit's also fine, but yeah. Who's that?
Team number 5, just you can add, we're gonna go between Wireshark and burp suite. We'll
Burp
see.
suite. Okay, that's fine. All right, Roman, if you don't decide, I'm just gonna say Wireshark or whatever you decide else. Okay, so it's fine. I think only Franco is remaining then. Okay, all right. All right, guys, going once here. Anyone else?
I was thinking if you didn't want repetitive tools, we could just do FTK imager for group 2. Team
Group
2.
2? Okay.
Yeah.
You can pick, yeah, FTK imager. Sure, that would be great. I'll remove autopsy from you guys. Okay.
Professor, we can barely see your screen.
Okay, let's make sure you see my screen fine.
I mean, we see the screen, but we can barely see what you're typing.
Oh, okay. That's what you meant.
The screen is
Alright.
okay.
Yeah. It's let me increase the font. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, all right, that sounds like good. Roman, if you decide something else, just add yourself in the spreadsheet. But for now, I'm just gonna say Wireshark as something else. Okay. Sweet, awesome,
Yeah,
guys.
it'll be something else. I'll find something else. Don't worry about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
no worries. All right. Okay. Sweet. Just also another housekeeping. And then Carol, you're on, right? Like after the class ends, some of the teams want to meet. So we will leave the Zoom meeting running for the teams to meet, and then you can talk. I have to take a flight this afternoon, so I'm gonna be gone, but I'll be able to check my Discord or messages. So let me know if you guys have questions on Discord, or if you have anything personal, email me. Email for anything personal, and then Discord for anything which you can share. Okay. Sweet, awesome. Thank you for the travel wishes. Okay. Sweet.
The
Go ahead.
teams that want to meet after, are we talking about lunchtime or 1 o'clock?
I think lunchtime is what they were saying.
Okay.
Basically, we can just leave the Zoom running, and then
Oh, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
maybe make one of them admin. So maybe we'll make Amin, you and admin. So if you want to start like a separate breakout room, you can do that. Is that cool?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, great, awesome.
Okay.
Okay, all right, we'll move on. So we're gonna cover 3 topics today. So the first one we're gonna talk a little bit about is social media or open source forensics. So let me bring that one up. Okay. So, this is a little bit different than maybe what you've sort of seen in other classes in a way, like, a lot of time open source intelligence or things like that, which we sort of talked about, is more in terms of like, getting information from from open networks, like, like a lot of new crimes are about, like, about like some person being in some location, or whether they shared some hate photographs online or things like that, right? So you can get the motivation of a crime from something like that. But this one is a little bit more around, like, what is the way to kind of do it right, so that you are able to present it in court of law as a forensic evidence. So the most important one you want to be aware of is, like, there is now like a sort of like a guideline. And so in the presentation here, you will see there is like a link to Facebook law enforcement guidelines. And there is, there is sort of like an RFC on this as well. So I'll kind of open both of those here in a minute. But, the way you want to think of that is, now there is a fair bit of like standardization on this. So, the one you want to see is like law enforcement online request. So, you can go to Facebook and you can request images. So, if you're going in court of law and presenting some Facebook evidence, which could be Instagram, WhatsApp, like, any of the meta properties, right? You don't want to just take it from that media site and go to the law enforcement, so you want to go through the proper channel where you are actually asking them for a request. And then there is a special mechanism for it. And so, Facebook has a tool here. This is like, for law enforcement. So it is as simple as that. And then, there is like a whole, like, document around, like, like what's sort of included. That's like what Facebook can do, what you're supposed to ask from them, things like that, right? Like, this is sort of like a standard mechanism. So you want to be aware of that. And most companies now have something like that. So in terms of doing open source intelligence right, you can kind of find out the motivation from, like, like OSINT hacking tools, if you will. But when you're kind of putting the evidence together, you want to make sure you get the evidence from the source of truth. Okay. Let me pull up the RFC one more time. Sorry about that. So this is RFC 3227. I'm going to, like, I think this link is no longer there, but I will put in the newer link in there. So this is around a security incident. There is like a breach. What are you sort of supposed to do, right? Like, in terms of that. So this is if you want to read something technical, this is a great read. And it's pretty short. And you want to, like, of course, like, I'll put the link in there, but, like, computer evidence needs to be admissible, authentic, complete, reliable, and believable. Like, these are sort of the it must conform to legal rules. So, you can't, like, just go steal someone's information and then present that in court, because that's not legal. Like, so you have to follow legal avenues for getting the information. So, and it talks about some technical things which, you guys have kind of brought up in the duration of the class. Things like, clock drift, which is like, oh, what if, like, someone, like, you can do that on your computer system. You can go and set a clock back, and you can kind of say, oh, this was what was happening on computer, like, now, but how do you go, like, detect that? So there is a lot of mechanisms to do that. So, you want to educate yourself, like, if your evidence might be kind of like, a cross question that way, like, do you think the timestamp on this is right? Like, And why do you think the timestamp is right? That sort of stuff, right? No, someone didn't go in and change the time on the phone. Like, how would you go about doing that, right? So that's great. I'm just gonna update this, Roman, here. I'm gonna update yours to volatility. Thank you for the message. Okay, sweet, awesome. So, kind of keep that in mind, like when you have the evidence, so any social media evidence, because it's all sort of new, right? So and there's a lot of new places, like a lot of new sites which come all the time, be it like the new X platform, or like be it TikTok, like, which could be foreign owned, right? Like, then how do you kind of cross question, like how do you think, like, the foreign government didn't plan this in there, right? Like, so how do you kind of counter the authenticity of your evidence? And there's no right or wrong answer there either. It's something you have to think from a domain expertise perspective, right? So keep that sort of in mind. So those are the things you want to think of in terms of social media. I'm not going to go into any of these, but there is a lot of social media stuff, like, there is just not Facebook now, right? There is TikTok, there is Instagram, there is Snapchat, which especially in the newer crimes, those make a lot more presence. It's also not that, it is also Google search history, for example, like what was this person searching, right? So these are all kind of tenets of it. The initial research you could kind of do with, like, a number of tools. I think in some other classes we've talked about Multigo, but there is a whole bunch of them, and there's a lot of like open ways where you can just use Google. You can just use a browser to do that, right? That's one way of, like, getting to relevant information. But the way you want to access that information, put it in your file, is following the proper channel of, like, going to the social media company and doing a law enforcement request. So you sort of want to do. So what are common threats? Like, I talked about, like, you want to make sure your data is authentic. So one is reproducibility. Like, if you kind of make a story based on timelines and graph, like this person was here and this is here because the proof is social media, or like proof is there, like, let's say location updates like that, right? Then, you don't want to rely on one source. You want to at least have two sources to kind of prove that, right? Like, so, and that kind of touches its reproducibility, right? You cannot use covert channels, like, you cannot, like, oh, someone sent me, they don't really want to tell their name, but like, because then there would be like this whole corroboration kind of thing where, someone is just trying to frame someone kind of deal, right? So that's why, you can do the research with the hacking tools, but, all the evidence need to kind of come from the right channels, which are legal. Some data is restricted to the operator. So, of course, like, they are not going to reveal data which they were not supposed to have. And that's not admissible to begin with, right? Like, like Apple's case, for example, right? Apple, the code couldn't force Apple to reveal the keys, right? Because Apple said, hey, it was in our contract. We don't touch any user's data. So we're not supposed to touch it. So we are not going to touch it. Like, so they could stand their ground, right? And they were right, like, in that sense, right? And so, kind of keep that. There is a lot of stuff around deletion of data, how things were deleted. But, all those sort of things you can actually, there are some laws in terms of, like, data needs to be kept 30 days, even if, and that's the part, like, if you go and delete something in social media sites and it was on their server, very many times they're obligated, even if that was deleted, they need to have a copy of it for 30 days. So, So the operator can produce deleted data. So, think of like in the hard disk case, you would go to like the deleted like sector and recover the file from its byte and do file carving, right? But in case of social media, you would just go to the operator and ask for like, hey, so and such image was deleted. Can you give me that? And most of the times they can actually do that. Cool. So there is a whole bunch of it, but that's like, the most important part is kind of keep in mind the, like, because Facebook is such a big platform with so many different things, look at like as a sample one, like look at the Facebook, law enforcement policy, and then look at the IETF 3227. Those are fairly short documents, but they inform you like, in the right way. Sweet. Awesome. Any questions on social media forensics so far? All right. Let's jump to mobile devices. So, this is a huge topic. It's also like the one which is the most meaty one in so many sense, because most modern devices now are some sort of a mobile device. Mobile just doesn't mean your phone. It also means tablets and, your watches and there is like, when I kind of include talk about cloud, I'll talk a little bit about IoT devices, like which also means like cameras, your Ring doorbells, things like that, right? Because a lot of those have been used in recent, crime cases, like, if, and I'll talk about those sort of a little bit. So mobile devices, the long of the short is like, these are now controlled by two companies. One's Google, others Apple, right? And so a lot of forensics here is based on like how those platforms sort of open up themselves for forensic investigations. The way they do that is like, and this is the part, like, on phones, for example, if something is like deleted, it's like really gone within seconds. So you can't like do file carving on an SSD. So you want to remember that. So so it becomes very important that live capture is very useful on phones, because if you can't really do recovery from SSDs, but mostly phones live, their RAM is pretty long lasting in this, as long as the battery is not dead, right? Like, so you can cover a whole bunch of that. The ones which I would say is, there is a whole bunch of tools which are in the field, and I'll talk a little bit about like the tools. And so this is sort of like the old, like, NIST had like a whole forensic testing toolkit, which has like, 23 mobile device forensics collection tools. But a lot of those tools no longer are valid, but roughly they were kind of like, you can extract data like, manually by like going through the device, looking at files. You can do logically by kind of like, using like, the hierarchies of like how this is file data, this is app data, this is device data, that sort of stuff. The interesting part is these 3, 4, 5, these are all hardware related, and a lot of these like expensive tools like Cellbrite use some of this stuff. So JTAG it's basically like a hardware standard to debug devices, and more these mobile, like it only works on some Android phones. It doesn't really work on Apple phones because they have custom hardware now. So it was like an open standard to debug hardware, and they basically could use that standard to kind of get the hardware level data from the device. But as the mobile device manufacturers are switching off to proprietary stuff, they can't really do much of it. The other is chip off, which basically means like these like custom chips which sit into these devices, which are called as PPMs in Apple phones. That's where your fingerprint is stored. That's where your credit cards are stored. That's where your encryption keys are stored. And it is in a special chip. And that chip is something you can kind of like, read data off, but it needs very specialized tools. You can also do micro reads, which is like, you can do a lot more on microcontroller level, where you could actually go in and look at the data on the chip pins, and when you do certain actions on the device, and there is a way to kind of capture data, and a lot of these tools do that for you. So, that's the sophistication of these mobile device tools, right? And like this pyramid doesn't really mention one, but the most important one of that, because it's a little bit on the gray side, right? Because there are all these 0-day bugs, which no one knows how the bugs were actually captured, and these tools sort of use them because technically it's illegal to do that. Like, and so it's a bit of a gray area. Like, Apple has sued Cellbrite's parent company for like having these 0 days, right? For like, it's a pretty big lawsuit. Because, they are like, oh, you have hacks into our devices and you're selling it, and it's not okay. But then, it's sort of like, that power struggle going on, where like the government is like aware, but they are like, oh, well, we need a way to get into devices sometimes, so we are like kind of delaying that part. So there is that part, that's why it's not talked about in like anything like NIST or DES document. There is this whole 0-day bug ways of getting data, right? And it's for both ecosystems, partially because it's, it is used, but it's sort of like the mechanism by which it's sort of done is sort of illegal, like, cool. Blacklight has been renamed. This was sort of like the Android. There's Android ripping tool. So CDMA workshop is like old now. Salvation Doctor is kind of old. The one I think I want to show you, and this is sort of like, I will add a slide to it. It's so this is sort of like the Cellbrite. This is sort of like, kind of like the go-to companies for a lot of mobile forensics. And so they have all these devices, and they're pretty like expensive based on like, the category you use. And so, they have, and they offer it only to like government agencies, like, and I'll just read a little bit from like, how they are different compared to other tools. Like, and again, like, they are not open source, right? Like, so there's basically, they have 5 times more mobile devices than any other platforms. They can extract 60%. Like, see, like the fine print here is they can't access 40% yet, because they only have so much of 0 days, right? And it takes a fair bit of time. And then they have a bunch of tools which kind of you work on this data, because a lot of this data coming needs a lot more analysis. So they have like a cloud system called Guardian, and they have like a analyzing system called Pathfinder. But their most important thing is like their device, like, this Ironside. And they've bought like a lot of companies along the way, which have added more and more capabilities into them. They have a few competitors, but they are like, they are this collection, behemoth, if you will. So this is, I want to show maybe one device in work. Let me see. I'm not gonna show this. Okay. Are you guys able to hear the sound when I play it?
No. No.
Okay. All right. Let me just do that. Just give me a second. Share computer sound. Okay. a bit of this, so you kind of get that. So let me know if you hear the sound, okay?
Immediately when this case came in, we knew how serious it was, given the number of victims and just what had occurred. I knew that I had to do the best job. Part of that is preserving the evidence the correct way, collecting things
So
the
this is
correct way,
how
and
the
making sure
device
that
looks
everything's
like.
processed thoroughly and examined thoroughly. I used Celebrite once we got the results from the suspect's cell phone to go through all of the communication data and to provide a copy of it to
So
Detective
this is
Thor's
their
daughter, and that way
cloud
she could go through
platform.
and see if there was anything helpful to her case.
When we spoke to the suspect, he provided, luckily, a full confession to the abuse and corroborated a lot of the statements made by the children.
So I'm not going to go into that, but I just wanted to show you like that brick, how it looks and how they're kind of like, you know, the cloud system looks. Basically, that's what they have. And then, you know, they kind of, you know, automate a lot of stuff in that realm. Okay. So take a look at Celebrite. A lot of other tools in this list of things have now become obsolete because just the technology has moved so fast. So I'm just gonna like add one slide in here and I'll upload that because I can't save this one on Celebrite. So keep that in mind. Cool. Any questions on this so far?
I have a quick question. How do you
Yeah.
keep up with all the, like, how fast the technology is moving? I guess you always gotta just
So
yeah.
good question. You know, the thing is, that's why the field is dynamic, but that's why, you know, it's also a good thing for you guys learning it new, right? You're not going to now fight for a job with someone who's been doing this for 20 years because they're like, well, we need the young people who know the young technology, right? So that sort of keeps it kind of open for younger talent in that sense. But that also means the talent which is coming in, you constantly need to update yourself. And that's part of it. Like, you know, it applies to me too. Like, you know, a lot of things like I'm like, you know, I'm looking at these slides. I'm like, man, like that was not too long ago. It was just 6 years ago and like all the tools are gone, right? But then you keep up because, you know, what you really learn in this is like your fundamentals, like how to do it, why to do it, what's your thought chain. And that's again the same thing with like security in general. And that way security is kind of great field because the process and the techniques don't change a whole lot. But the tools change a lot, which is fine. Like, you know, that's sort of like, you know, and the good news is increasingly, like, you know, back in the day, the tools for like Android Ripper or any of these tools, they were really hard to use. But now look at Cellbrite, like it's just like, it's super easy, like anyone can use it, like, you know. So a lot of tools also improve, but what's important is the process. And that's why, like, you know, this is a little bit different class where I'm sort of making you read this textbook and you're going through reporting because that's kind of what works, right? That's what you're going to get paid for, like, you know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Sweet. Any other questions? All right, okay, sweet. So I am going to jump into cloud forensics and we're going to use the textbook for it. Just give me a second. Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to cover a whole bunch of like the initial stuff, but you know, in cloud forensics, like, you know, the legal constraints remain the same. It's sort of similar as as social media in that sense, a lot of these cloud vendors, and we'll kind of go to one of them. Let me bring up so AWS, like law enforcement requests. So it's very similar to like how social media sort of works. Like, there is a standard practice on like, how AWS does stuff. Like, they kind of keep, this is on Amazon, but let me go to so that's, you can do it on like pretty much, you know, yeah. All right, so this is for AWS. Again, like, there is like a, Amazon law enforcement tracker. And so like, how we looked at this Facebook page where they had like, the Facebook online request like this. So this is the Amazon's version of it. And so it includes not just Amazon, but all its affiliates and subsidiaries and stuff like that, right? And then you can email them at subpoena@criminal.amazon.com, or like their Ring cameras, like subpoenas@ring.com. So, all of that is included in like this one tracker. So law enforcement can kind of go in there and ask like, hey, give me the Ring video. Hey, give me the cloud trail of like this AWS account, that sort of stuff, right? And so you want to kind of, think of it in that way. And that's sort of like, the technical extent of it, but the technical challenge is you need to know what you need to request. And so in this case, it really, if you're doing cloud forensics, it really helps knowing network forensics, because, the old network kind of terminologies and technologies map somewhat similarly on the cloud. So even just what you're going to ask, right? Like, hey, give me, let's say, you want like a network trace, and in some cases they might have it, some cases they might not have it, like, but how do you know to ask a network trace, for example, right? And so you wouldn't, and that's why you need to kind of know a little bit about like how cloud works, and how to kind of do that. So just the architecture is a big challenge in cloud. And the technology is there, like, to help you, but you need to understand it. Like, um, uh, you know, so that's sort of the big part of it. How do you kind of conduct a cloud investigation, right? Like, you would sort of like, you would use some of the tools, which, I'll cover here in a minute, but the way you would kind of do a cloud forensic analysis is very similar to like rest of forensics. You kind of first create your plan. You would like create like all these suspect assets. Like it might be like a AWS account, it might be like, a web server, it might be a S3 storage bucket. Like, you sort of go through that. And then you kind of, for each one of these, you kind of think of like, oh, are there any restrictions for digital evidence connection? Like in a way, like, is this like legally, what can I get here, right? And so for each technology, there is a little bit of like, understanding what you can get. So that's sort of like, again, to come back to the challenge, right? You need to kind of know all the layers which make it in that sense. And then for each one of those, you kind of like, ask for a disclosure request from the cloud vendor. So what tools are typically used in this, right? So there are a few of them. F-response is one. Magnet's Axiom is one of them. I think Julie in her talk, she talked a little bit about Magnet, and we'll look at Magnet in a minute. But there are a few sort of like cloud vendors, few forensic tool vendors in this sort of space. So Magnet is one of the big ones. So I'm gonna kind of show a couple things from there. Magnet. And they bought a whole lot of companies. So Axiom Cyber is the one. It's sort of like again, like a lot of these tools are proprietary and cost a whole bunch. But maybe let's look at the product brief of it, and you can maybe see some of the so like you can use Magnet Forensics to find like some of their like supported workflows, like if an employee did a misconduct, like if they exfiltrated a whole bunch of files. If e-discovery is the process of like when law enforcement asks hey, give us data for all of these things, kind of this. Then they kind of talk about IP theft and incident response. So these are sort of like their tool set kind of covers this, but more in terms of like when you use their tool, what you're sort of looking at it is you're going to kind of trace, like you can use like a timeline and like different assets in it. Let me see if they actually have like okay, yeah, there it is. So you can kind of like pick an asset and see all the things going on with it. So this tool helps you visualize the data you have on a case, for example, but only in the cloud sense, right? And so there is a whole bunch of like things like connections, and so Yara rules are nothing but like they are like is this like a virus, is this an indicator of some sort of compromise, right? Like, and so some of the Yara rules kind of capture those. And so you would know, like, is this a good thing, is this a bad thing, when you're looking at evidence, right? And so it'll look like a graph like this, and that's kind of what their tool looks like. But you can see that this being sort of a new field, a lot of this is very like, especially cloud is very dependent on you understanding the technology. And so Magnet is one tool I would kind of recommend as like it's sort of used a lot again, but it's paid for. And the book kind of talks a little bit about it. There is F response, but Magnet's more popular. See. So again, these are right now a little bit kind of like built on you understanding, or built on the forensic analyst understanding cloud. So a lot of times an analyst or like a investigator from a law enforcement would just hand it off to like an external company or a lab, and the lab would do a lot of this work. And so you would basically, if you worked at the lab, you would be doing all these things. You would be like going to all the cloud vendors, getting like appropriate evidences, and then kind of putting the information together for presentation or a report, right? And so that's sort of cloud. Any questions so far?
Yes, Professor, what course do you teach for the cloud at Merit, CIS?
Yeah, I think CIS 52.
52. Okay.
Yeah, so we cover a lot of like the cloud architecture. We cover AWS, Azure, and GCP, but we go quite deep into different things. So yeah, so all these moving parts, we kind of go a bit deeper into like the layers of the cloud cake, if you will.
Okay, and that is offered in the fall then, CIS 52?
I think so. I mean,
okay.
The school decides when they offer. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, CIS 52 is on the fall.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's about the cloud security and the fundamentals.
Yeah. So, there is like few reading things, but like, I'll tell you stuff like that. This is not too long ago. It was published, this paper, like, but, I mean, it's 2013, but this whole OpenStack cloud computing framework is now not very popular. Like, and so, there will be very few cases which would kind of come along this. Like, so that's why, like, a lot of the tools and the tools in this space move fast. And so the one which is kind of kept pace and remain quite, relevant is Magnet, and because they are the industry leader. So, sweet. All right. Okay. Awesome. So I'll cover a couple things before we wrap up today. And I wanted to kind of like, just sort of talk about report. I know like some of the links in the reports which I shared with you were outdated or gone. And I'm glad some of you found like archive.org to find those. But really, like, just use a format which seems relevant to you and like professional to you. And you can just search on Google for that and like pick something which kind of seems like logical to you. In the book on this chapter, it's really like boils down to these few things, like, have an abstract table of contents, body of your report, your conclusion. That's the most important thing. Your references, like how did you get information? You don't need to have a glossary. You don't need to kind of have acknowledgements, and then include any appendixes which you think might be relevant. Like if you were, for example, like I might do a little simulation and ask you a question like, why do you think your evidence is so like it's correct and it was not spoofed? Then maybe you can like just go to like an appendix and say, look, in this sort of way, like on this network, like there were only 5 devices, and like this was one of them. And here is like extra information for all the protocols running there. Something which kind of adds to your like your conclusion, which you don't want to include in the body of the report. So so you can kind of also look at the one in the book. It's quite generic. You can like kind of look at in detail, but really there are 4 or 5 sections, and like how you lay it out. There will be like few like you can include some screenshots of the things you use. You can point out to the folders which you think were like suspect, the files which you are suspect, and then talk about those suspect files in your body of report, right? So all the suspect stuff you talk about in the body of the report. You do a conclusion, and then in the appendix you add all like additional information, which might be all these all these like avenues which you explode, which might add to your suspect findings, right? So this is also a pretty decent format in the book. Yeah. And then what I would say is I would maybe just read and we've done this chapter before, but like like I would read these question answers a little bit, like for this is interesting, how did you find this was an image of this computer, like, and then you should be able to say, oh, I use this tool to do this and on this computer. And you should be able to kind of talk about your process and be able to kind of answer. So these questions are a good exercise, and kind of think of it in your sense, like if you are presenting that case study in court of law, what someone might ask questions. So kind of look at that a little bit in chapter 15. Summary is where I would look. Cool. Awesome, guys. All right, that was the content for today. I am going to wait for a few questions if you guys have any. Let me bring up the class. All right, assignments. So, all the quizzes are open until May 3rd. Like, if you see week 1 to 5, all the quizzes are open. The due dates, like if, you can still submit the quizzes, it will just mark you late. So, if you have not submitted any of the quizzes, take a minute to do that. Or like take your time to do that. You will, if you don't have a good excuse, there might be few points cut for being late, but other than that, like it's actually a great way to improve your score on the class. The quizzes are pretty straightforward. So quiz 5 is due next week. It's based on the social media, mobile, and cloud computing stuff which we covered today. Okay. And then net labs are also due. We have 13 through 19, and they sort of go, you know, through your net labs. So follow that. So between your quizzes and labs, it's 33% grading. And your, weekly project report is 1%. So it's quite like, minimal grading. It's basically 50 points. And then in your final course, which is due next week, your case study is 300 points. Your tool is 100 points, and your presentation is going to be 100 points. I know Bridget had a question, like if you need to be present to kind of do your presentation. If you cannot make it, that's fine, but at least someone from the group should be able to make it. If you're a group of 1 and you can't really make it to the presentation or like somehow miss it, and the best way to then maybe make up for credit is like maybe record your presentation and send a link to a private YouTube video where you are doing the presentation. It shouldn't be very long, 5 to 10 minutes is fine. So if you miss the presentation and no one from your group is able to present, then basically record the presentation, and that's how you will get credit for the presentation. And you can kind of add the link in your live presentation submission if you do offline. But otherwise, I will kind of, when you present in the class, I will grade them. Cool. So there is a lot of stuff to like go through, and for next week's reading, there are a few chapters. Like depending on the time, we will have maybe 20 minutes. We will still review the content. All these 4 chapters which we covered today. We will be doing a reading group on next week. So the format of the next class will be your reading group. Then your presentations, and I'm seeing your presentations might go for somewhere like 2 hours. We will have a guest, so we might have some conversation with the guest, and we'll do a wrap up of the class. So that should be about 3 hours. That's sort of like the agenda we'll be doing. We'll be presenting in the order of your team numbers, okay? So that's what we'll have the next week as a format. Any questions? All the files, all the presentations are here in the modules. So today, all the presentations from today are in the internet and social media forensics tab here. So take a look at those. See. Anything else you guys want to cover today? Any questions? And then I was going to quickly also ask Carol, do you have anything you wanted to share with the students? I know there is an assignment called roll call attendance. We used to use that, but that's 0%. It's not graded. So if anyone had question on it, just ignore the roll call attendance. We couldn't hear your question. Can you repeat it?
Oh, yeah, so I was just wondering about the hypothetical. So the case study is like you look at what the tool does that you're using, and then you have a hypothetical. So your hypothetical, does it, I've got a couple of scenarios, but I just wanted to make sure so that it's not like, I wasn't trying to copy one that had already been done. I was like trying to find something similar that would use a particular feature of the tool, like with a mobile device. So as long as your hypothetical gives like the right context and domain, I just wanted to kind of make sure, like it's supposed to be hypothetical, not like a literal one, but like maybe based on a real one, but not a real one.
No, are you talking about case study or are you talking about your tool?
I'm talking about the case study.
No,
So the tool that we're using, that we're doing the research on.
Yeah,
supposed to be the presentation on.
No, the case study is very, very concrete. You have a case study, you have the data for it, and you have to create the report. There is no hypothetical in the case study. So there is no hypothetical in the case study. The case study is very concrete. It has its data. You go through the data and you create the report. And the data, as I sort of reviewed last class, has a whole bunch of information from the crime scene. So you need to analyze that. So that's your case study. It's very concrete. You have the data in the zip file there, and the task is to create the report.
Okay, so I think maybe the language of it, I'm confused by the language of it. So so it's not the case study, it's the one that we're going to be presenting as a group. So team 7 is presenting using
Yeah,
autopsy.
so autopsy, yes. So that's the one which is your digital forensic tool research. Yeah, you just pick a tool you like and you just present the analysis of how would you use that tool. Okay. Anyone else confused about something like this? Any doubts on that?
All right. You saying from the case study, we come up with the report, right?
That's right.
Okay. That's one thing. Now, so that means case study report. Now, earlier, we're looking at topics. So this is just for the final project.
Yeah, for your tool research,
Okay.
So these tool topics are for tool research, and that is 100 points. Okay, your case study is 300 points, and then your presentation is 100 points.
Presentation is 100 points. So the tool research is for the presentation.
Yes, you do presentation both on your case study and the tool together.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is in your assignments, the forensic case study, 300 points, the digital forensic tool research, 100 points, and your final case presentations.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about that. Let me get back to that. Okay, cool. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question about using the tools. So what I understood, so it'll be together with the case study, and pretty much the case study and the tools is the way that we want to solve the problem, or we're trying to solve it with the tool. So to be able to use the tool, do we need to do like a screenshot of how was the process, like to find how to solve the incident, or do we need to pay like to get access to the tool and then show you like a screenshot of the process, sorry, or how do you want us to prove that tool? How does the tool work?
For the tool research, right? Or for the case study?
Yeah, for the tool.
For the tool research, yeah, you don't need to like, have screenshots and anything, just your PowerPoint presentation of like, this is how I would use SleuthKit, or this is how I would use like, DD, or this is how I would use let's see, autopsy, like, yeah. If you were to, and this is sort of, if you look in the assignment, it's pretty prescriptive that way. Like, it's like, oh, choose a topic which interests you, create a presentation, at the most 10 to 15 slides, like, that sort of stuff. Like, and if you can include these slides if you want, but it's not required. Just do something which seems appropriate to you. But this is a template you could follow. Ulysses has a question. Do you need to pay to using the tools? No, for your autopsy, or for your forensic case study, all the tools are free. Like, and they are kind of what you saw them in your labs. So like, yeah. So
you answer my question already with the tools.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, it's like Wireshark and DD and all of those are free. Sweet. All right, guys, that seems like a good stopping point here. I am excited to see you guys' presentation. Don't fear it. Don't think too much about it in one way, but like, I feel like that's just having a concrete case study and bringing all the things together is going to give a perspective of like what it is to be like a forensic analyst, right? Like, it's a mini version of like, you got a real case. And then the tool presentation is just going to help all of us like learn from each other. You could possibly find like new switches to DD command or new ways of using autopsy and kind of share it with class, and someone might like, oh, that's great. Like, I'm going to use that tool for something like that in future. So, think of it more as a sharing and learning exercise. Don't feel like, you're kind of graded too heavily on the content of it. Lot of your points are going to be on effort more than getting it right or wrong. Your case study might go like you might get everything, or you might get only a little bit. That's fine. Don't worry too much about it, but put in the time, put in the effort, like, sweet. And good luck with it. If you have any questions, please ask them on Discord. We are going to keep the Zoom meeting going. Carol's going to make Amin as the admin. So if you need to kind of form like breakout rooms or something like that to have students meet, you can, please facilitate that. And I'll see you next Friday. If you have any questions, if you need any help, just message me on Discord, or if you have something personal, email me. and I'll make time to help you guys. So especially if you need to even meet early next week for something, send me a message and I'll make some time for that. Cool. All right. Any closing comments, thoughts? Awesome, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Looking forward to your presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good trip.
You too. Thank you. Thank you.